Since its opening in 2012, millions of visitors have come from all over to enjoy this spectacular botanical experience. So please welcome, this is the first ever award recipient, so please welcome Dr. Tan and his team, which he will introduce. Mr. Tan, Dr. Tan.
You poor people. We are plants people. We rather speak to plants and flowers than to people. I have to keep you awake from 4 o'clock on. Just snore softly. I may have lost my voice because I came by way of Montreal and I tried to catch snowflakes with my tongue. Giving truth to the adage, there's no fool like an old one. But it's much easier for us to find you here in the US than for you to find us in Singapore. So I thought I'd better show you where we are. We are that little red dot on the green belt, which is the equator. And there are not that many cities on the equator: Quito, Bogota, Lagos, Nairobi, and Kuala Lumpur. So it's an easy claim to say ours is the biggest botanic gardens on the equator. Singapore is actually very small. We are the size, is an island nation. We're the size of New York City, about 300 square miles. You can drive right through the nation in half an hour. The strong man is LKY, the guy in the white hair, with the white hair, and his son is still the prime minister. And that's why the nation of Singapore, which is much younger than the Singapore Botanic Gardens, has had a very focused trajectory in its growth and development. That's why we are able to punch above our weight. Very fortunately for us parks people, he liked gardens and mandated that Singapore should be a garden city. So if you look at the map of Singapore on the top in 1986, when we had a population of about 2 million people, and then at 2007, 1986 and 2007, when we have about 5 million people, the green cover has actually increased over the island. And the parks people are trying to get us from being a garden city to being a city in a garden. So all this, the stars were aligned in the firmament when the project came about and we got it approved of Gardens by the Bay. Because anything in Singapore that involved using land, that requires government backing. And for something this size, you see the green areas, that's all on reclaimed land, built up from the sea at great expense 40 years ago. So for 40 years, this piece of dirt has been washed by monsoon rains, and now Singapore has decided it's time to develop this piece to extend the downtown of the city into this area. We are outgrowing our shoes. So we were very fortunate at the timing. We said, you need a green lung in this future city, and we'll provide it. And we needed the other end of the bookend. We had the Singapore Botanic Gardens on one side, and we said we needed another botanic gardens that really features horticultural plants, beautiful plants, like Longwood Gardens. So let's do the Singapore version of the Longwood Gardens here. It comprises 3 gardens, all fringing upon a body of water that was formed because of the land massing. It used to be 2 rivers would run into the sea here. So it was still running into the sea till a dam was built across it. So it's now a reservoir, which means Singapore is getting close to self-sufficiency in water. And that's a very important thing because our neighbor is forever threatening to turn off the tap. But having that degree of autonomy is very good, especially in a resource like that. So the gardens were built on the premise of environmental stewardship. We're very concerned about water recycling. We're very concerned about energy sustainability. We needed to cool glass houses, so we actually developed our own energy systems by burning wood waste. Being Parkes people, we generate 60,000 tons of wood material a year. We burn about 40,000, and that is enough electricity to cool our glass houses. So that really cuts down cost. And then we also have to be very concerned about biodiversity conservation. We are, as my previous presenter said, right in the hotbed of biodiversity. But when the British colonized us, within the first 10 years, 80% of the island was cleared. Luckily, there were portions of primary forest, and we've been actually reintroducing germplasm from the surrounding regions back to Singapore. So biodiversity conservation is very key. And finally, it's very important for us to stress to our future generations that Singapore is a nation of immigrants. We must always be tolerant and keep our doors open and our hearts and minds open. And that is a very important lesson, and we do it by looking at the use of plants in the cultural groups. So, we are civil servants, and it's not true that civil servants don't give a flying whatever as to what the public thinks. We actually canvassed the public as to what they wanted in their new garden. And they said, we want color. Singapore's too green. Can you imagine? Singapore's too green. Okay. We want to be comfortable in a garden in the tropics. Okay. We want it to be cheap. Now you see why civil servants tend to be very unfriendly. But what we did do was to take this on board. We already had a concept for the gardens. We were able to open up international competition to get us the best minds and brains possible, but we wanted our consultants to be led by a team of landscape architects. And in the team should be brilliant architects, engineers as well, horticulturists, but they must all be subject to a green dictator. Because whatever we develop must support plant life and the way we want it done. So this is why the whole look and feel of the gardens does not just reflect what the architects want, but that was in reaction to what we needed. And we took the team around the world literally to look at all the beautiful glass houses that are in existence that did not work. We looked at all the places with things that worked very well, the beautiful interpretation that can be found all over the place. So we took back good lessons and started designing the gardens. Now this is, remember, reclaimed land, perfectly flat, dull, boring. Singapore actually is a very boring little computer chip of an island. So we have to create our own little bumps. And then imagine a botanic gardens that has to open its doors after merely, let's say we broke ground in 2007 and opened in 2012, and it has to look mature. So where do we get that feeling of age? From the plant material. Fortunately, we are the Parkes people in Singapore, so we know whenever there is development, we'd go in there and rescue the trees, put them in roadside nurseries. Then we also made sure we had a budget that allowed us to go to 4 continents and select the plants that would augment our perpetual spring of a garden, a perpetual summer. Singapore's on the equator, and we have a wealth of plant material outside. So what we wanted to bring to the Singapore public is a touch of spring, maybe a touch of fall. So that's why one of the glass houses has a temperature range that allows us to grow Mediterranean-type plants in fairly dry, low humidity, and the other one, a cloud forest. And so we have this science fantasy type landscape, but it's practical to a fault. Those super trees are concrete towers enmeshed in stainless steel. But of course, we tweaked it so that they look quite elegant. And we made sure they are vertical gardens. Epiphytes festoon the trunks. And we have to make sure that the cones are relatively clear because that's our light and sound show in the evenings. And it's quite magical. So it's been amazingly successful for us. So this is the gardens today, after having opened the doors only less than 2 years ago. The external gardens are free admission. They are very well connected to the rest of the island by public transport, which is very key. I also, however, make sure that the garden is actually an island surrounded by a moat of water. So we are able to irrigate or capture water, and it goes back into that stream, which flows into the reservoir. And the planting is such that we have water filtration from plants. We have 2 series of gardens which we call the heritage gardens. The first is, of course, the different cultural gardens. We have an Indian garden that is made up of a lot of plants that you find in India. The colors are very Indian, the cultural motifs, the banyans, the different trees, Madras tree, the Bengal fig, etc. Same thing with the Malay garden on the top, the Chinese garden, and the colonial garden. The colonial garden is black and white in theme because the pseudo-Tudor houses by the Brits, the British, when they come to Singapore, were always in black and white. So that's seen as colonial. So we made sure this is our white garden. The Chinese garden is reminiscent of the Suzhou gardens, except with more color. And the Malay garden has all the wonderful plants that you find in a Malay kampong. The other series of gardens is the world of plants. Our educational syllabus has divested itself of natural science more and more. Our national universities no longer have botany and zoology departments. They have bioscience. That means they make pills. So how are our kids going to reconnect to the natural world? How can we seduce them away from their iPads? So what we do is to try to present plants in intriguing ways and showcase the different features of plants that are exciting, and why we ask them intriguing questions. What makes a tree a tree? When is a tree not a tree, like a palm tree? It's an overgrown grass. And why is a cycad palm not a palm? Because it's a cycas. And what's a cycas? Well, you come and find out. So it's this kind of thing. So this is plants and the planet. That's the outdoor gardens. And of course, we also completed a cactus garden, which is nothing to you guys out here where it's so dry. We just have to keep the rain off. We have the heat and the sun. And we went shopping in Arizona and Canary Islands and got ourselves some cacti. And the kids love that. And we keep them away so that they can't scratch their initials on it. And we're very stern because I have a cane for that. Then to make sure that the kids drag their parents to the gardens, we have a children's garden. And it's water play. And in the heat of Singapore, water play is a real draw. And I haven't shown you also the various parts of the gardens where we have arapaima fish tanks, because kids get bored by plants that don't move. So it's a little bit of that, along with the plants that the fish are associated with. We always tell the story. And we have to make sure that the children's garden is really fun. The play equipment is fun because I tried them all. There's a skywalk that links the super trees. So you get a very good, that's 60 feet above ground. The tallest super tree is about 130 feet or so. So it does make quite a show. And when I first had this proposed, the question was, why do you need everything so big? So I said, did you see the elephant next door? That's the Marina Bay Sands building. That would have dominated and become the iconic structure of Singapore, which is a no-do because it's a casino. And half of Singapore is very, very uptight. So anyway, it allowed me to develop these Gardens by the Bay. And as I say, you get a wonderful view of the city from the skywalk. And at night, the super trees become Avatar. The lighting and the music combines. And, well, at first I was thinking, you mean we actually won an award as a themed entertainment, a park? We developed passive recreation areas. So this represents a paradigm shift. Thank you. And we are very, very honored. The glass houses. Those were designed not to be architectural splendor, for the architectural splendor, but because I said I don't want any supporting props inside. So it's got to be supported as in a glass envelope. And it's got to face the east so that in the trajectory of the sun, there's minimum shadows cast. So I have maximum light inside. Then we looked at the glazing. We cut 30% of the heat from infrared so that, again, that reduces the cost for cooling. We cool the domes with chilled water, which we chill using our energy plant at the back. So this is actually, the energy story is very well told. Inside the first dome, this is our flower dome. This is about 2.2 hectares, and this is why I have my team. I have no brain for figures. Acres. 2.2 acres. So fairly large. As you can see, no support. And some of the plants that we purchased from around the world are growing very well. And we have 8 changing exhibits a year in the center. And that's where they were recently in the Netherlands buying 30,000 tulip bulbs. These are some of the baobabs and ceiba trees that we found, some in Africa, Senegal, and some in Brazil, Argentina. And that was a wild trip. We select each tree individually. And I must say that our loss of plants shipped that way is amazingly low, about 10%. And when you consider how far they've been in containers, this has been a good record. And usually we find out about these trees in that they are in the way of construction of a highway. We're told by the government, okay, these trees are dispensable. And so we would then rush down and book them. This is one of the changing exhibits. That's the first tulip show. Then we also combine lighting at night and music. So it's, after you've been outside in the tropical heat, you come into the dome, you're in San Francisco. We combine artwork with the flowers. And it's been my pleasure to look for cheap but good art. Then, of course, we only charge for admission to the domes very reasonably and for the skywalk. So I have to make sure that we recover a certain percentage of the recurrent costs. So we have dining inside the dome facilities for 800 diners, and that's rented out all the time. I have a whole set of F&B throughout the gardens. We have a lot of programmable space that can be leased out. And to date, we have surprised the government by being able to be about 70% self-sustainable. And for a botanic garden, usually it's about 40. So we are doing pretty well, but it was planned with the help of excellent landscape architects and planners. This is in the other dome, the cloud forest. Same temperature range, but high humidity. And we generate the cloud cover every hour on the hour. And this is what you find on tropical mountains, where you also find some of the most glorious plants, the orchids, the bromeliads, the anthuriums, the gesneriads. So, when we were doing this mountain with this skin, we planted the last plant the night before we opened. And we just crossed our fingers because you can't do gardening on this place. You go spelunking. Luckily, we do our homework. We had set up glass houses to study for 2 years before we embarked on it, for the proper light, proper temperature, and the range of plants we could try. So fortunately, it has been very successful. And in fact, what we have to do occasionally is to make sure some of the more rambunctious plants don't become weeds. But it's a beautiful walk in the sky walks at 2 different levels. It's extremely lush. In the heart of this mountain, we have interactive displays as well as an IMAX kind of movie screen showing what happens to our globe when it heats up by 5 degrees. And it holds the school kids, nobody runs around, not even little kids, when they see the images as the temperature goes up. And it's just a short show, very effective. So we do a lot of educating that way. We have a waterfall. How high is this? 105 feet. And it also moves air. It's functional. And it also creates a humidity there. The architecture, because we had Wilkinson Air do it, it actually won World Building of the Year. So it stands on its own as an attraction. We were very pleased with that. The water story is a very good one for our children. And also now, because of the water and the plant life, the insect and bird life has increased dramatically. We now have those people with $10,000 photo lenses coming in because the birds that were driven out of Malaysia because of cutting down of forests for rubber plantations and oil palm are coming through and seeing that, hey, they can stop here a while, and some of them even become illegal immigrants. And so we are able to really encourage diversity of not just species, but also plant material, ornamentals. These are some of the kingfishers that's into the 3rd clutch. Butterflies are great. And our most recent visitor was totally unsolicited. Maybe we can have the video on it. A smooth-coated otter came with its mate and decided to look around and see whether they liked the gardens or not. And I'm glad to say that they are now nesting in the gardens. That sand just provided the excellent scratch post for them. These are otters that have now started to come back in numbers around the mangrove areas and the estuarine areas in Singapore. And it was a response to loss of habitat elsewhere. So we're just delighted that they've decided to come to Singapore. And this shows that in a man-made area, you can achieve a state of naturalness with the help of the animal life. We actually pegged ourselves as a center for edutainment. So it's educational and it's entertaining. We have a concert plays. Jennifer Lopez came, Jason Mraz, and so forth. So we have concerts for 10, 20,000 people. And my next move is to get us a permanent stage. And that should complete our programmable space. Dining is very important, close to the heart of all Singaporeans, as you can see. We love everything and we eat everything. And at all different cost levels, it cuts across all pocketbooks. This is Satay by the Bay. So, as Singaporeans, we never believe that we do anything good unless someone tells us from the outside. So it's a good thing that we're receiving awards and accolades so that at least I keep my job. And so at night, I was also able to have donations of beautiful sculpture. This is Mark Quinn's 6.5-ton bronze baby called Planet, floating on one arm, and items like that around the gardens. So I'll end with a bit of our opening day for you.
On 28 June 2012, Singapore welcomed a new garden for the city at its heart, Gardens by the Bay. The centerpiece of this garden is Bay South, a 54-hectare site that is home to a selection of plants and trees from every continent except Antarctica. Built on reclaimed land, the gardens seek to provide the people with a national garden they could call their own, much like Central Park in New York and Hyde Park in London. The garden is designed to provide the people with their own green space, bringing them closer to nature.
The next phase from being a garden city is to make ourselves into a city in a garden, because it means connecting our communities and our places and spaces through parks, gardens, streetscapes, and sky-rise greenery.
Opened by Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, Gardens by the Bay, Bay South, is home to more than 700,000 plants of 2,000 species, cultivars, and varieties. Each conservatory has a unique microclimate. The flower dome replicates the cool, dry climate of the Mediterranean type and semi-arid subtropical regions of the world, while the cloud forest replicates the cool, moist climate typically found in tropical montane regions between 1,000 to 3,500 meters above sea level.
The mission of the Gardens by the Bay team is to create an intelligent people's garden that would be cherished and well patronized, and meeting the expressed wishes of the Singapore residents for spring and fall color in a land of perpetual summer green.
Complementing the cooled conservatories are 18 super trees. These unique structures are vertical gardens of epiphytes and flowering climbers. Like real trees, they harness solar energy for lighting and are integral to the garden's ecosystem. Bay South is home to one of Singapore's largest outdoor event space, The Meadow, where global stars such as Jason Mraz and Corinne May performed during the grand opening celebrations, held over 2 weekends. Throughout the opening celebrations, the gardens attracted generations of Singaporeans who came to marvel at the numerous plants and trees, as well as enjoy the performances by leading Singaporean artists and musicians throughout the day.
The place was so well done. There's so many beautiful flowers around. Many of them I've never seen before.
You combine nature and man-made nature very well together.
You know, it's like a garden within the city and with all the landscape. It's beautiful.
For Singapore being a garden city, this is something that we should be very proud of. That.
Oh, it feels me very proud to be a Singaporean.
Gardens by the Bay, Singapore's new national garden. A place where wonder blooms.
Now, this is going to be a tough act to follow. The comedy Singapore plant guy. I dare the next one of you to do that. We recommend, because we ran out of time for Q&A, that you take your Q&A to them during this 10-minute break. Thank you.